Right, welcome to a new day and another new video. I'm putting quite a lot out lately because we've got a lot to mess with. But today is going to be on the Bruin, not the 700 diesel or the 550 XR. We haven't touched the Bruin for a little while now, to be honest. We did quite a lot of work on it, but then we got the 550, so we've been sort of fascinated by that. But if you watched previous videos, you'll know we've done a bit to it already. We've got 4 new ball joints on it, on either side. There's a video on how to do them. And that's tightened the suspension up much more. None of the other bushings are bad, they're all good. We've got a new pair of brake calipers on with new pads. We've got a new CV boot on it. We've got a new master cylinder on it, and we've obviously bled them brakes through, and we've got decent hydraulic pressure. We might need to bleed them just a little bit more, but obviously we haven't ridden it yet, so I don't know if we're going to need to or not. We've got new, nice, chunky, aggressive tyres on it. On the front, the backs were fine. If you want to know what these are actually made by a company called Protector. As you can see there, they're Chinese-made tyres, but they are reasonable. They're quite good quality. They get you through most stuff, and they're not the cheapest, so they are decent tyres. We've got a new ignition key on there, as you can see. All lights up as it should now. 2 keys with it. If you watched the original video, you'd have seen this 4x4 light wasn't illuminating. But as you can see now it is, and it switches off with 2-wheel drive and comes back on with 4-wheel drive. We've also replaced the solenoid on it, which we robbed for a different bike, and we've also got a new starter motor on it, and a new battery, of course. Again, if you watch the original video, this came to me with carburetor problems, or supposed carburetor problems. So we put a new aftermarket carb on, which is supposed to be a decent quality one, and we tried to start it up, and it did run. But it will only run past half throttle, and it just dies after a couple of minutes, and it's incredibly difficult to get it to actually start. It takes a lot of cranking. We've got decent spark on it, and we put the original carb back on, and it's doing the exact same thing. And sometimes, depending on the condition, it seems quite random. It just won't run at all. You'll spray easy start directly into the carb, and it'll just do absolutely nothing. So I'm pretty sure that the issue we're having isn't a carburetor issue, and I'm pretty sure it's not a mechanical issue. We've got plenty of compression turning it over, all seems well. So I'm going to do a few things today to try and diagnose exactly what is going on with it. We've taken the front plastics off to make things easier, and we've also sent the racks off to the powder coaters, because these racks on these bikes have a horrible sort of textured finish from factory, and it's almost impossible to get down smooth with sandpaper. So we've sent it off to the powder coats to be done nicely. So I'm just going to check the valve clearances. To do that, you want to put it on the compression stroke at top 10 centre. So you want this mark here. Can you see that? Yeah, that mark there, you want to be aligned with this notch here. And you probably won't see in there, but there's a little line on the crank you want to align with this slot here. Obviously need to take this cover off, take that little nut off, and take the plate off that covers that. But look how clean this engine is. I don't see many in this clean condition, especially not 10 plus years old. There's barely a bit of tar or muck or anything in there. That's very nice indeed. Same down the chain, look, there's no tar or sludge or anything. Extremely clean engine. So, just looking at it now, it's cold. Just feeling that, I know there's not a lot of play in it, but they may be too tight, potentially. So I know the intake is supposed to be 0.06 of a mil, so I'm going to get my feeler gauges, which I've got here, and have a little look. So I'll just find the 0.06 and be back. Okay, so that's a 0.063 on the feeler gauge, so about as tight as it should be, and it's nice resistant in there, look. So that's spot on. You don't want them loose. You want them to be as tight as they can be. And when it was running, when we did get it to run, I could hear hardly any tapping. It was sounding very smooth indeed. So I'm not even going to bother checking the exhaust. I'm certain that these are correct. That's right within tolerance, and the exhaust is a bit more of a pain to get to. So I'd say I'm not even going to bother checking. So I'll stick that cover back on, and then I think we've got to try and have a look at electrical issues. I have known a bike before have the trigger coil go inside this case, which caused a erratic spark timing. It would spark, and it would spark strongly, but you never really knew when it was sparking. It would backfire through the carb and do all sorts of strange things. I think personally we might have a spark issue. I don't know exactly what. Obviously there's a few components to this system. You've got the stator itself, which charges the battery, but I know that's operating because when I had it running I checked it with a voltmeter and it's running at about 13.9 volts, which is correct. You've got a voltage regulator, but if that wasn't working I wouldn't expect the battery to be charging, so I'm not too worried about that. You've got your CDI, which is basically the computer for the whole bike. You've got your coil, and as I say, you've got the trigger coil in there, which does your spark timing. Now, I personally think it might be the trigger coil that's gone, not allowing it to start properly, but I'm going to test the coil, and then I'm going to test the resistance on that. So I've got to look up how to do that, and I'll be back. Right, so I've been into the service manual now, and I've printed off the relevant pages. So we've got a full ignition circuit diagram here. And we've also got these ignition circuit troubleshooting pages. Now, I don't care how good of a mechanic you are, these are the most handy tool you can have, because obviously these people made the machine, so they know exactly what's going on with it. I'm not a qualified mechanic, to be honest, but electrical isn't my best thing, so I find these extremely handy. Unless you really know what you're doing, these are such a good investment. So certain things we can check off straight away. So check the fuses, and we can check them off because we know we've got a spark. We just think it's either a weak spark or an incorrectly timed spark. So I've checked the fuses as a matter of course, but obviously they're all okay. Check the battery's brand new. Check the spark plug, I put a new plug in it, so that's fine. Check the gap, well they come pre-gapped, so it's absolutely fine. Check the cap, we know that's correct, because I've tried a separate plug in it on the block just as a manual sort of spark check, so now that's okay. Now check the ignition coil, that we need to do that, and so that's refer to page 844. I've got that printout here, so I'll check the ignition coil. Then we've got to check the pickup coil, which is what I was just talking about, that does your spark timing, and again 845, which I've got printed off here. And then check the main switch. Well, again, the main switch is brand new, so that's not going to be our issue. Check engine stop switch. Well, if that was faulty, then we wouldn't have any spark at all, so we can pretty much rule that out. Check it tyre system wiring. Don't want to do that because that involves uncoiling everything, but to be honest, I highly doubt it's that. And if none of those things check out, replace the CDI unit. So to start with, we're going to check the ignition coil. As I say, we've got all this information printed off here. That's the corresponding sheet for the diagram telling you what's what. So checking the ignition coil, we need to check the primary coil resistance, and if it's out of specification, replace it. So we've got the resistance there. So disconnect the ignition coil connector from the coil terminal, obviously. Connect the multimeter on the ohm setting to the ignition coil as shown. Okay. So positive tester on probe 1, negative tester on ignition base 2. Okay, so I'll get to the ignition coil now, take it off. Well, I might not need to take it off, but I'll have a look and I'll come back to you once I've got a reading. Okay, so here's our ignition coil. You can see the orange probe there. So we'll have to get the tester onto that, and then the other one we need to put on the base of the actual coil, so I'll just do that now quickly because I don't think I can film it. Okay, so we should be a bit more capable of checking the trigger coil. As you can see in the manual here, checking the pickup coil. Pickup coil resistance should be 459 to 561 ohms, which is more like the meter can do. As you can see here, you've got 2000 ohm setting and a 200 ohm setting, so it should be able to do that. And we've got the red and white wire is positive tester probe, and the negative is the white and green. So I've already disconnected it over here, and I've already tested, and we're getting 510 ohms. I'll see if I can get it on camera to show you. Okay, so as you can see there, we've got 510 ohms coming from the pickup coil. So in theory that's good, which is good because we don't have to replace the pickup coil, but it's bad because we still don't know what the hell is wrong with it. The only other thing it could possibly be is the CDI box, but they ain't cheap, so I don't really want to replace that willy-nilly. And there's no test procedure you can do on the CDI box. So I'm wondering if the next thing we have to do will have to be a compression test. Now there is one other thing that could cause the spark timers to go out, and that is if the flywheel key is partially sheared and the flywheel is moved out of position somewhat. But that involves removing this casting as if you were going to replace the trigger coil assembly. So you've got to drain the oil, and obviously you've got to put a new gasket on. So that's a little bit of a job to do if it's not the problem. So I'm going to have a little think, really. We know it runs, so we know it can't be anything too major. But it really is just a bit of a guess at this point. As we've checked the fuses, we've checked the ignition coil, we think that's fine. We've checked the pickup coil, that appears to be fine. We checked the valve adjustments, they appear to be fine. And compression appears to be fine. So I'm going to have a little bit of a think, and I'll have to come back later on today, or it may be later. It'll still be in this video, but I'm going to have a think. Right, so I think I'm able to show you something. I wasn't aware, or I didn't notice in the manual, there's actually two coil checks you can do. The first one is as we did from the orange terminal to the block, but you can also do from the orange terminal to the actual HT lead. And that is more capable of measuring that with this meter, because it can go up to it's got a 20,000 ohm setting. And if we look in the manual, the specified range for this test is 6.32 thousand ohms to 9.48 thousand ohms. And what are we getting with the original coil? Well, we're getting 18.18 thousand ohms. So that is massively too resistant, which would lead to a weak spark. So if we test this coil that I've had lying around for some time, let's see what this one says. It's going to be a bit of a pain to get it in the end. So that's measuring as it should, 7.77 thousand ohms. So that's within 6.32 to 9.48 thousand. So now, I believe the fitting for the spark plug is just a screw in to the cable type fitting. So hopefully I'm going to be able to liberate it from this dead coil and put it onto the good coil. If I cannot, then I'll have to order one and give it a test. I have looked at these and the part numbers, they actually are identical. They're exactly the same coil on the 350 and the 400. So yeah, I'll try and do that and then I'll be back. Right, so this is going to be the final update for this video. I must admit, I do hate problems like this. They're properly annoying. Having to test bits and pieces, but I'm not sure on the coil problem after all, because now I've taken this off, this coil does read the same as the other one, 7.7 some odd, but this, the actual boot itself, says no continuity the right way through it, so there must be a break in there, you would imagine, which I thought, oh well, that would work because spark would be struggling to jump through, and it would only be running at high RPM. So the spark would be travelling through at high RPM and jumping over the gap, if you like. So that was my theory, but I've tried the coil just wrapped around the plug in a very ghetto way. I mean, it might not run like that. That might be still the problem, but I would think it would try. But I'm getting no running at all still. So I'm going to have to order a new coil. I have also tried testing the stator. As you can see, there's 3 different combinations you need to try on this plug here. The range is 0.486 to 0.616 ohms. And I'm getting 0.9 out of every single one. So I mean, that could be a problem, but I just don't know, because as I say, the multimeter doesn't seem to work very well on very low ohm readings. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end this video here, because there's not a lot more I can do today. I'm going to purchase a new coil, because they're hardly anything, they're like 15 quid. So we'll stick a new coil on just in case. And I'll also purchase 2 diagnostic tools. One is a good multimeter that I can test the stator properly with. And I'll also purchase a compression test, because although it feels very good compression, there's a chance that we might be low. That would cause M symptoms, but I really don't think so, looking inside the engine and looking and feeling with my spanner on it. But it's worth a try, and I could do with one anyway. So I'll order them a few bits, and then there'll be a second part to this video which will aim to actually get it running in. So yeah, I'll see you later.